Hey, it's good to see you today. My name is Philip Thomas, pastor of Journey here in Elgin, Texas, and welcome to our Tuesday edition of our Journey Through Scripture. Hope that you've thawed out from last week and are ready to continue looking through Scripture in a chronological order as we're making our way through the Gospels during this time. So today we're going to be looking in Matthew chapters 8 and 9, Mark chapters 4 and 5, and Luke chapter 8. So the main stories that we're going to see here are the story of Jesus calming the sea, and then also the story of Jesus healing demon-possessed individual. So I think it's important to kind of see the differences. There's a little bit of differences here, but they're also very similar. Matthew kind of says that there were two men that he healed, demon-possessed men that he healed. Matthew also doesn't go into near the detail as Mark and Luke, but we don't know. There were many that Jesus healed, and so I'm sure Matthew, he was probably using that. People will say because Matthew is directly connecting and drawing from the Old Testament, and so there was an importance of having two people witness something happening, and so Matthew is pointing out that there were plenty of witnesses to see this, that it fit what was needed to witness a miracle that was laid out in the Old Testament. So we start off in Matthew chapter 8, verses 23 through 34. You have Jesus gets back into the boat. They start traveling across the lake, and basically he falls asleep, and the wind starts blowing, right? And I love what it says here. It says, but he was asleep, verse 25. Then his disciples came to him and awoke him, saying, Lord, save us, we are perishing. But he said to them, why are you fearful, O you of little faith? He then arose, rebuked the winds and the sea. There was great calm. And the men marveled, saying, who can this be, that even the winds and the sea obey him? Right? So, I mean, the disciples have been seeing amazing miracles, but this is something different. I mean, it's not just healing someone who is blind, as amazing as that is. This is different. All of a sudden, even nature listens to this guy, and they were terrified of the storm, and then they began to be terrified of Jesus in a good way of recognizing, wow, who is this man? So we see Jesus doing this miracle that shows he has power and authority over the physical world. And then Matthew continues in verse 28, where he comes and he heals a demon-possessed man. It says, and suddenly they cried out, saying, what have we done to you, Jesus, you Son of God, that you have come here to torment us before the time? Then Jesus cast them into the swine, and the pigs run and kill themselves. Then verse 33, then those who kept them fled, and they went away into the city and told everything, including what had happened to the demon-possessed man. And behold, the whole city came out to meet Jesus. And when they saw him, they begged him to depart from their region. Now we'll get into that here in just a minute and talk more about it. But what we see here is in Matthew, back-to-back miracles. You have Jesus showing his authority over the physical world, but also his authority over the spiritual world as well. I think there's a reason. This would have been very obvious that this guy is not just a normal prophet. There's something powerful about him. The winds and waves obey him, as well as the spirits obey him. Then in Mark chapter 4, starting in verse 35, all the way through chapter 5, verse 20, you have the same story. And you have Jesus falling asleep, and he wakes up, he rebukes the wind. And this one's interesting in Mark verse 38, chapter 4, verse 38. The disciples wake him up and say, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? thought that's an interesting thing. It's something that we can learn. That's a human tendency, is when we find ourselves in the storms of life, we forget that Jesus is always with us. And one of our first questions many times is, God, have you forgotten me? Do you not care? Well, where is God? And in fact, that's a tool of Satan to get us to doubt God. When we, by all rational thought, especially for the disciples, they should know, of course, Jesus cares for them. Right? They've witnessed unbelievable things already. But whenever the storm arises, it's easy for us not to think clearly. And we start allowing those doubts to creep in, and we start wondering, God, do you really care for us? And of course, the answer is yes. I love that Jesus just gets up here in Mark, and he just says, peace, be still. Everything became calm. And then he says, why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? And they feared exceedingly and said to one another, who can this be that even the wind and the sea obey him? All right. So again, their level of faith is now becoming more mature and is ratcheting up because of what they're experiencing and what they have seen with Jesus. And then Mark chapter 5 is the casting out of the demon. We learn a little bit about this demon-possessed man. He's crazy. He's so strong. He can't be bound, and he's just wandering around causing problems. And he, again, responds to Jesus by saying, my name is Legion, for there are many. Right? A very ominous, very creepy response whenever Jesus says, who are you? And he says, I am Legion. Right? So it's multiple demons that are possessing this man. And of course, Jesus puts them in a herd of swine. I always thought that was interesting. Why Jesus would send them to pigs, because I also wondered, why would there be pigs? Guess what was not a huge commodity in Israel is pigs. They do not eat pork, right? So what's going on here? Well, Mark actually kind of lets us know this. If you know your geography, which I didn't, I read about this. Mark chapter 5, verse 18. And when he got into the boat, he who had been demon-possessed begged him that he might be with him. However, Jesus did not permit him, but said to him, go home to your friends and tell them what great things the Lord has done for you and how he has had compassion for you. And he departed and began to proclaim in Decapolis all that Jesus had done for him, and all marveled. Now that's interesting that it mentions Decapolis specifically. It says in the country of Gadarenes. That is a very Greek area. There would have been a lot of Gentiles in that area. It would have been made up of about 10 different cities. They were Roman cities. So there would have been numerous Hellenists, right, or people with Greek background, which is why there would have been pigs there, because they would have eaten pigs. I think it's also another part about that is the people they asked Jesus to leave. The Roman people, and especially the Gentiles there, were nervous about people who did magic, right? They viewed it, that was kind of sorcery, and this guy's coming in doing this magic. It's like, no, we don't want to have anything to do with you. Keep moving. And that's kind of the feeling that you get. They see this amazing thing, and they're just like, we don't know who you are. Just move on. And so that kind of fits in this area. And again, of course, Jesus performs this unbelievable miracle, and this guy who is freed from the demons, he wants to hang out with Jesus, but he probably, there's a good chance that he wasn't Jewish. There's a good chance that he was a Gentile. And so Jesus just told him to stay. And of course, he definitely starts spreading the message, because this is a ball is starting to roll now with all that Jesus has done and how he is building a name for himself, that everyone is starting to learn about Jesus. Then we get to Luke chapter 8, verses 22 through 39. Again, same story. Jesus calming the seas, and then the last part of that chapter of chapter 8 is Jesus healing the demon-possessed man. Sorry, I got a little distracted there. But then want to go ahead and read into Matthew chapter 9, Mark chapter 5, and Luke chapter 8. The next one is Jesus' two more miracles that kind of go hand in hand. The healing of Jairus' daughter who died, and the healing of the woman who had been bleeding for 12 years. And this is, you can read through those different passages, very similar in all three accounts. What you have is Jairus, who worked at the synagogue, who his only daughter is very sick and ill. So he comes and asks Jesus, which is a pretty big deal because he works for the synagogue. So he works for the religious leaders. The fact that he's going to Jesus and asking him is actually shows his faith, because it's going to probably put him at odds with some of the religious leaders. But he knows he is desperate, and he is calling out, and he believes that Jesus can heal his daughter. And so then they start going through the crowds, because again, the crowds have gathered, right? This ball is now rolling. People know who Jesus is. And they're trying to get to Jairus' house, and a woman who had been bleeding for 12 years, which would be horrible in any circumstance, but especially in that culture and that day and age, she would have been considered unclean, which means she could not go to the synagogue. There were many things she couldn't do, and if she touched anyone, they would become unclean, and then they couldn't go to the synagogue. And so what you have is she knows this, so she's trying to do this inconspicuously, and she just believes that if she just touches Jesus, that she will be healed, and she does. By doing that, she made Jesus unclean, technically, right? But Jesus feels power leave from him. I love it whenever, you can just imagine Jesus, he's just being surrounded by all these people, and he says, "Whoa, who touched me?" And Peter is like, "Lord, everyone is," right? And he says, "No, I feel power leave from me." And then he tells the woman, "Your faith has healed you," right? That because she believed, she was now healed. And what an amazing miracle for her. But again, Jesus allowing the unclean to heal him, and he cleanses those who are unclean, just as he cleanses us in our lives when we are unclean. And then they continue on. The story continues because, right, he's going to see this girl, Jairus' daughter, and as they reach the house, the news comes that the daughter has already died. And Jesus, in an interesting way, says, "Okay, I'm going to only allow Peter, James, and John. Y'all can come with me, and the mom and dad, but no one else can come because the little girl is just sleeping." And of course, he was mocked. He goes up. The girl is dead, but Jesus raises her to life again. And he's very specific here. He says, "Do not tell anybody about this." I think, that's kind of interesting. Again, that would have been going up a level, right? So just as the disciples, when Jesus calmed the winds and the wave, they were like, "Whoa, that's another level of miracle and of power than what we have already been seeing." Well, whenever you bring someone back from the dead, that's kind of ups it again. And Jesus is trying to maintain calm, maintain peace, and it's a dicey situation, right? There's real things going on here. The Romans are watching Jesus, the religious leaders are watching Jesus, and Jesus is aware of that. And so he wants to be very careful. But it's becoming very obvious. There's something about Jesus. All right, so we'll stop there and we'll keep going on Thursday. Read Matthew chapter 13, Mark chapter 6, also Matthew, the end of chapter 9, all of chapter 10, and just the first part of chapter 11, and then John chapter 5. So that's Matthew, the very end of Matthew 13, Mark 6, Matthew chapters, the end of chapter 9, 10, and the first of 11, Luke chapter 9, and John chapter 5. All right, so we will continue, and we will see you on Thursday.